The thermometer on my dashboard read -14 degrees when Karen Fletcher's voice crackled through my phone at 5:30 in the morning, screeching about how I hadn't cleared her driveway fast enough during the worst blizzard Montana had seen in 20 years. I'm Harrison Young, and I've been running Young's snow removal services in Whitefish, Montana for the past 8 years. When I say I'm the only service available, I mean it literally. The next closest snow removal company operates out of Kalispell, 32 miles away, and they stopped taking clients in our area 3 years ago after the owner's son moved to Arizona. That leaves me, my 2 plows, and my crew of 3 guys to handle every driveway, parking lot, and private road in a 50-square-mile radius when winter hits. This particular February morning, we'd been working for 16 straight hours. The storm had dumped 31 inches of snow overnight, with drifts reaching 5 feet in some areas. My back ached, my hands were numb even inside insulated gloves, and I'd consumed enough coffee to fuel a small army. We'd prioritized emergency routes first, medical access, then moved to our residential contracts in order of severity. Karen Fletcher's development, Pinecrest Estates, was scheduled for 7 a.m., which was actually earlier than most of the other neighborhoods. "This is completely unacceptable," Karen's voice screeched through the speaker, making my exhausted brain throb. "I have a homeowners association meeting this morning and I cannot get out of my driveway. Do you understand what that means? I am the president of this HOA, and I have responsibilities." I pulled my truck to the side of the road, letting my guy Marcus continue toward the commercial district while I dealt with this. "Mrs. Fletcher, we've been working all night. Your development is next on our list. We'll be there within the hour." Within the hour? That's what you said an hour ago when I called your office line. I hadn't checked my office voicemail. I'd been physically operating a plow truck for 16 hours straight. "Madam, with all due respect, we're doing the best we can. This is the biggest storm we've had all season, and we're the only service available. We'll get to you as soon as physically possible. Your contract states you'll clear our roads within 4 hours of snowfall cessation. The snow stopped at 4 a.m. That means you're already in violation." I closed my eyes and counted to 5. The contract actually stated we'd make our best effort to clear roads within 4 hours, weather and circumstances permitting. Karen Fletcher had a habit of reading contracts the way she wanted to read them. "I'll have a crew there by 6:30. "That's the best I can do." She hung up without another word. Pinecrest Estates was one of those developments that looked perfect in the summer, cookie-cutter houses painted in approved earth tones, lawns maintained to exact specifications, and a homeowners association that seemed to exist solely to make residents' lives miserable. I'd heard horror stories about violation notices for leaving garbage cans visible 30 minutes past collection time, fines for Christmas lights that weren't pure white, and a legendary dispute over whether a resident's truck was commercial vehicle gray or acceptable personal vehicle gray. Karen Fletcher ruled over this kingdom with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove wrapped in more iron. She was 47 years old, blonde hair always styled in that specific suburban mom way that required weekly salon visits, and she wore her HOA president title like a military rank. I'd had the misfortune of dealing with her ever since signing the snow removal contract 3 years ago, and each winter brought new complaints, new demands, and new interpretations of what our contract supposedly required. By 6:15, I'd grabbed Marcus and my other guy, Devin, and we rolled into Pinecrest Estates with all 3 trucks. The main road was buried under nearly 2 feet of snow, with drifts creating miniature mountain ranges across the pavement. This was going to take at least 2 hours to do properly. Maybe 3. Karen Fletcher's house sat at the corner of the development, a 2-story colonial with black shutters and a wreath on the door that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Her driveway was a decent size, maybe 40 feet long, and I could see her standing in her front window, arms crossed, watching us like a prison warden. I took her driveway first, hoping that would buy me some peace. My plow scraped against the concrete, pushing the heavy snow into neat banks on either side. The snow was that heavy, wet kind that made your back scream, and your equipment worked twice as hard. Halfway through her driveway, I noticed her front door open. She marched out in a puffy white coat, boots that definitely weren't rated for this weather, and that expression that every service worker in America knows and dreads. I kept plowing, pretending I hadn't seen her, but she planted herself right in my path. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window. Cold air slammed into my face. "Morning, Mrs. Fletcher. Just finishing up your driveway now." "You're going too slow," she said, her breath creating clouds in the frozen air. "I've been watching you and you're deliberately taking your time." "This is retaliation for me calling this morning, isn't it?" I stared at her. My brain, operating on no sleep and too much caffeine, couldn't quite process what she'd just said. "I'm sorry, what? You heard me. You're angry that I called to complain, so you're going extra slow to punish me. I know how people like you operate, people like me." I let that slide, though it took effort. "Mrs. Fletcher, I'm going the appropriate speed for snow this heavy. If I go too fast, I'll damage your driveway or miss sections. This is how snow removal works." I've seen other plow drivers work twice as fast as this. "You're being deliberately inefficient." The other plow drivers she'd seen were probably clearing parking lots, which was completely different from residential driveways, but explaining that would require energy I didn't have. "I'm doing my job correctly. I'll have your driveway cleared in about 5 more minutes. This is unacceptable. I'm documenting this." She pulled out her phone and started taking photos of my truck, my license plate, and me sitting in the driver's seat looking like I wanted to drive directly into the nearest snowbank and never emerge. I finished her driveway in silence while she documented my apparent crimes against efficiency. When I moved on to the main road, she went back inside, presumably to file whatever complaint she was planning to file. The rest of Pinecrest Estates took 3.5 hours. The roads were wider than standard residential streets because the developers had wanted that luxury community feel, which meant more surface area to clear. By the time we finished, it was nearly 10 a.m., and I had 17 missed calls from various clients, 6 voicemails, and a text from my wife asking if I was still alive. I was heading home for a shower and maybe 4 hours of sleep when my phone rang again. Karen Fletcher. I seriously considered not answering. My finger hovered over the decline button, but she was a client and I'd built my business on customer service, so I answered. "Young's Snow Removal. I need you to come back to Pinecrest immediately. What's the problem?" "You left snow banks blocking several mailboxes. That's a federal offense. The Postal Service cannot access these mailboxes due to your negligence." I rubbed my eyes so hard I saw stars. "Mrs. Fletcher, when we clear roads, snow has to go somewhere. It's physically impossible to clear roads without creating snow banks. Residents need to clear the area around their own mailboxes. That is not what our contract states. Our contract requires you to ensure all common areas remain accessible. Mailboxes aren't common areas. They're individual property owner responsibility. The road in front of the mailboxes is a common area. Therefore, you're responsible. This was the kind of circular logic that made me understand why some people just gave up and moved to Florida. I'm not coming back to hand clear around individual mailboxes. That's not part of our service. Then you're in breach of contract. Madam, I respectfully disagree. Our contract specifies road clearing, which we've completed. Individual mailbox access is homeowner responsibility. We'll see what our HOA attorney has to say about that. She hung up. I drove home, took a shower so hot it nearly scalded my skin, and collapsed into bed. My wife, Jennifer, brought me a sandwich and told me Karen Fletcher had called the house phone while I was in the shower. I turned my phone off and slept for 5 hours. When I woke up, it was 4 p.m. and the sun was already setting. Montana winters meant darkness by 5, which made late afternoon feel like midnight. I checked my phone and found 12 new messages. 3 were from Karen Fletcher. 2 were from a number I didn't recognize, identifying itself as Robert Patterson, HOA attorney for Pinecrest Estates. The rest were from other clients, mostly thanking me for getting to them as quickly as we had. I called Robert Patterson back first, figuring I might as well deal with the problem head-on. He answered on the second ring. Patterson Law Office. This is Harrison Young returning your call. Ah, Mr. Young, thank you for calling back. I represent the Pinecrest Estates Homeowners Association. My client has expressed concerns about your snow removal services failing to meet the terms of your contract. I'd been through this dance before with other difficult clients, though never with actual legal representation. What specifically is the concern? According to Mrs. Fletcher, you failed to clear snow within the contracted time frame, worked at an unreasonably slow pace, and left common areas inaccessible. She's requesting a full refund of this month's service fee and termination of the contract. With all due respect, Mr. Patterson, none of those claims are accurate. We cleared the development within a reasonable time frame given the severity of the storm, and the fact that we're the only service available in the area. Our pace was appropriate for the conditions, and all roads are fully accessible. If individual homeowners need to clear around their mailboxes, that's not covered under our service agreement. Mrs. Fletcher has photos documenting your slow pace and the blocked mailboxes. Photos of me doing my job correctly, you mean? Look, I'm happy to send you a copy of our contract and our service logs from last night. We served over 40 clients during that storm, working 16 straight hours. Pinecrest got the same level of service everyone else did, actually better since I prioritized them higher on the schedule than I needed to. There was a pause. I'll review the contract and get back to you. However, I should inform you that Mrs. Fletcher is quite insistent on this matter. Mrs. Fletcher is insistent on most matters. I'm running a business, not a personal on-call service. We ended the call, and I sat at my kitchen table feeling that specific kind of exhaustion that comes from dealing with unreasonable people. Jennifer came in and squeezed my shoulder. Let me guess. Karen Fletcher and her lawyer now. That woman needs a hobby. She has a hobby, making my life difficult. The next morning, I had to be up at 4 a.m. for another round of plowing. The storm had passed, but overnight snowfall had added another 6 inches, and all my clients needed clearing again. I scheduled Pinecrest for mid-morning after I'd handled the commercial clients who paid premium rates. At 8 a.m., my phone started ringing. Karen Fletcher. I sent it to voicemail. She called back immediately. I sent it to voicemail again. On the third call, I answered, Mrs. Fletcher, I'm working. I'll get to Pinecrest by 10 a.m. By 10? There are people who need to get to work. This is completely unacceptable. I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting about your services. You do what you need to do, madam. I'll be there by 10. I hung up before she could respond. Marcus, who was riding with me that morning while Devin handled one of the other trucks, shook his head. That woman's going to give herself a heart attack, or give me one. We worked through the commercial district, then hit 2 other residential neighborhoods before heading to Pinecrest. When we arrived at 10:15, there was a small crowd gathered at the community center, a building at the center of the development that hosted HOA meetings and community events. I ignored them and started plowing. The roads weren't too bad, just 6 inches of fresh powder over yesterday's cleared surface. This should have been a quick job, maybe an hour for the whole development. Halfway through the main loop, Karen Fletcher marched out of the community center with 3 other people behind her. She walked directly into the path of my plow truck. I stopped and opened the door. "Mrs. Fletcher, you need to move. This is dangerous. We need to talk, right now. I'm working. We can talk when I'm done." "No, right now. I have witnesses present." She gestured to the 3 people behind her, 2 women and 1 man, all probably in their 40s or 50s, all wearing similar expressions of suburban outrage. I shut off the truck and climbed down, my boots crunching in the snow. "Fine. What's this about?" "The HOA board has voted unanimously to terminate your services effective immediately. We'll be hiring a replacement company and billing you for the difference in cost." I looked at the 3 people behind her. They looked uncomfortable but determined. "On what grounds?" "Failure to meet contractual obligations, unprofessional conduct, and providing substandard service." Karen handed me a printed letter, actually printed on official-looking letterhead, outlining these complaints in detail. I scanned it quickly. It was mostly nonsense, twisted interpretations of our contract mixed with completely subjective complaints about my attitude and work ethic. But one line caught my attention. "You're claiming I damaged HOA property. Your plow scraped the curbing on Pine Street, causing approximately $800 in damage." "That's impossible. The curbing is under 2 feet of snow. I haven't touched any curbs. We have photographic evidence." Of course she did. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a curb with scrape marks. The photo was clearly taken in different lighting than current conditions, probably from a different day entirely, maybe even from last year. "This photo isn't from yesterday." "Yes, it is. The snow depth is wrong. This was taken on a different day." "Are you calling me a liar?" I was, but saying that wouldn't help. "I'm saying this photo doesn't show damage from yesterday's plowing. Look, if you want to terminate the contract, that's your right. I'll refund this month's fee prorated for services not yet rendered, but I'm not paying for damage I didn't cause. You'll pay what the HOA demands, or we'll sue you." Marcus had gotten out of the truck and was standing nearby, recording the conversation on his phone. Karen noticed and turned on him. "Stop recording me immediately. We're on public property," Marcus said calmly. "I'm allowed to record. This is private HOA property. You're trespassing." "The roads are publicly maintained county roads," I said. "The HOA doesn't own them. We have every right to be here, and he has every right to record." Karen's face was turning red, that specific shade that meant she was about to escalate. "Fine. You're both trespassing on private property. I'm calling the sheriff. Please do." She actually pulled out her phone and called. I stood there in the cold, my breath fogging the air, while she reported that we were trespassing and harassing HOA residents. The dispatcher must have asked questions because Karen's answers got increasingly shrill. "Yes, they're refusing to leave. Yes, I feel threatened. They're large men with heavy equipment." I was 6'1" and built like someone who did manual labor for a living, but I wasn't threatening anyone. Marcus was shorter than me and had the demeanor of a golden retriever. The idea that we were threatening was laughable. "They're on their way. Karen announced triumphantly after hanging up. Great. I could use an objective third party here. We stood there in awkward silence while I sent a text to my attorney, a guy named Phil Crawford who handled my business contracts. I gave him the short version and asked him to be available if this escalated. The sheriff's deputy arrived about 15 minutes later, a young guy named Miller who I'd actually gone to high school with. He looked at the scene, looked at me, and I could see him mentally preparing himself for whatever nonsense this was about to be. "Harrison," he said with a nod. "Miller." "What's going on here?" Karen jumped in before I could speak. "These men are trespassing on private HOA property, harassing residents, and refusing to leave after being terminated from their service contract." Miller looked at me. "Harrison, we're plowing the roads which are county-maintained. Mrs. Fletcher informed me the HOA is terminating our contract, which is fine, but she's also claiming we damaged property and demanding payment. I disagreed. That's when she called you. The roads are county-maintained." "Yes, sir." Miller looked at Karen. "If the roads are county-maintained, they're on public property, madam. There's no trespassing here. But this is a private development. The roads were dedicated to the county when the development was built. It's part of the public right-of-way." Miller had clearly dealt with this before. "Now, what's this about property damage?" Karen showed him the photo. Miller examined it, looked at the actual curbs buried under snow, and handed the phone back. "Madam, I can't verify when that photo was taken. If you believe Mr. Young damaged HOA property, you'll need to file a civil claim. That's not a criminal matter and it's not something I can resolve. But he's refusing to pay for damages." "Because I didn't cause them," I added. Miller sighed. "This is a contract dispute. You need to handle it through civil channels. Is there anything else?" "He's providing substandard service. That's also a civil contract matter." Miller turned to me. "Harrison, are you doing any further work here today?" "Not if the contract's terminated. I was halfway through clearing the roads, but if they don't want our services, I'll leave." "You can't just leave the roads half cleared," Karen nearly shouted. "You just terminated my contract. We'll sue you for abandonment." Miller held up his hand. "Okay, everyone calm down. Mrs. Fletcher, if you terminated their services, they're not obligated to continue working. If you want the roads cleared, you need to either reinstate the contract or hire someone else. There is no one else. He's the only service available and he knows it. He's holding us hostage, and there it was, the real issue." Karen Fletcher was used to having leverage in every situation, used to making demands and having them met. But in this case, geography and economics meant I held the cards. If she wanted snow cleared, I was the only option and she couldn't stand it. "I'm not holding anyone hostage," I said calmly. "I'm running a business. If you don't want my services, that's your choice. But you can't fire me and then demand I keep working." Miller nodded. "That's reasonable. Madam, you need to make a decision, either keep his services or find someone else. But you can't terminate him and then claim abandonment when he stops working." Karen looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. The 3 board members behind her were whispering among themselves, clearly realizing the problem with their power play. One of them, a woman with short brown hair, stepped forward. "Could we have a moment to discuss this as a board?" "Sure," I said. They huddled near the community center while Miller and I stood by my truck. He shook his head. "HOA drama, constantly. My wife wanted to buy in this development last year. I told her absolutely not. Heard too many horror stories." Smart man. The board's huddle broke up, and Karen marched back over, looking like each step caused her physical pain. "We'll continue the contract on a probationary basis. However, we expect improved performance and professional behavior going forward." I could have pointed out that my performance had been perfectly fine, and my behavior had been nothing but professional. I could have told her where she could stick her probationary basis. But I was tired. I had other clients waiting, and sometimes you just took the small victory. Fine. Same contract terms as before. I'll finish clearing these roads now and we'll continue on the regular schedule. We'll be watching you closely. I'm sure you will. Miller left. Karen and her board went back to the community center, and I finished plowing Pinecrest Estates. Marcus got back in the truck, still holding his phone. I got all of that recorded. Good. Send it to my email. I have a feeling we're going to need it. The next few weeks were tense but manageable. We got 2 more significant snowfalls, and each time I cleared Pinecrest without incident. Karen found small things to complain about. A snow bank she claimed was too high here. A section she said wasn't cleared thoroughly enough there, but nothing that rose to the level of our previous confrontation. Then March arrived, and with it, a warm spell. Temperatures shot up into the 50s, and the massive snow banks started melting. This was the messy part of Montana winter, when everything turned to slush and mud, and the snow revealed all the debris it had been hiding for months. I was at home on a Saturday afternoon when Karen Fletcher called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mrs. Fletcher, I need you to come to Pinecrest immediately. What's the problem? Your plowing damaged multiple sections of curbing, and now that the snow is melting, the evidence is visible. I have multiple homeowners documenting extensive damage. My stomach dropped. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove to Pinecrest with a sense of dread. When I arrived, Karen was waiting with a group of about 8 homeowners, all standing near various sections of curbing along the main road. She'd clearly organized this, turned it into a performance. The curbing did show damage, scrape marks and chips in the concrete. But as I examined them closely, something wasn't right. The damage was too consistent, too uniform. Real plow damage would be random, different depths and patterns based on varying contact. This looked almost like someone had gone along with a tool and deliberately marked the curbing. This doesn't look like plow damage, I said. Of course it's plow damage. What else could it be? I knelt down and ran my finger along one of the scrapes. The concrete dust was fresh, not weathered. This had been done recently, probably within the last day or two. This is fresh damage. This wasn't caused by plowing weeks ago. Are you accusing someone of faking this? I stood up and looked her in the eye. Yes, actually, I am. This damage was done in the last couple of days, deliberately, probably to create a false claim against my company. The homeowners started murmuring among themselves. Karen's face went red again. That is slander. It's not slander if it's true. Look, I'm happy to have an independent contractor inspect this damage. Someone who specializes in concrete work can tell you exactly when this damage occurred. We don't need an independent contractor. We have photographic evidence documenting that this damage appeared after your plowing services. You have photos of these specific spots from before the melt. She hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. The HOA documents all common area maintenance. Show me the photos. I don't have to prove anything to you. You're responsible for this damage and you'll pay for repairs, or we'll take you to court. One of the homeowners, a guy maybe in his 30s, spoke up. Actually, I don't think he did this. I walk my dog every morning and I've been watching the curbs as the snow melted. These marks weren't here 3 days ago. Karen turned on him. Excuse me. I'm just saying I've lived here for 5 years and I pay attention. This damage is new, really new. Are you a concrete expert, David? No, but I have eyes. Something's not right about this. Another homeowner, an older woman, nodded. I noticed the same thing. I thought maybe I just missed it before, but the timing is strange. Karen looked like she was losing control of the situation. Everyone is dismissed. I'll handle this matter with Mr. Young directly. The homeowners dispersed slowly, several of them giving me sympathetic looks. David, the dog walker, came over and shook my hand. I don't know what her problem is, but you've always done good work here. My driveway's always cleared on time, no damage, no issues. Thanks, I appreciate that. After everyone left, Karen stood there with her arms crossed. You're not getting out of this. I'm not trying to get out of anything. I'm saying I didn't cause this damage and I'm not paying for it. If you want to take me to court, go ahead. But I'm warning you, if it comes out that this damage was faked to create a false claim, that's fraud and there are legal consequences for that. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the law. There's a difference. I left Pinecrest and drove straight to my attorney's office. Phil Crawford was working late, preparing for a Monday trial, and he let me in through the back door. Harrison, you look stressed. I filled him in on the situation, showed him the photos I'd taken of the curb damage, and explained my suspicions. Phil leaned back in his chair. Can you prove someone faked the damage? Not yet. But I can prove the damage is recent, and I can show through our plowing logs that we haven't worked that area in weeks. We stopped plowing in mid-February when the last snow fell. That damage appeared sometime in the last few days. So you need an expert to examine the concrete and provide a timeline. Exactly. I know a guy. Forensic contractor, does a lot of work for insurance companies. He can examine the damage and give us a professional opinion. It'll cost you probably $1,000. Better than paying for repairs I didn't cause or losing the contract. Phil made a call, and by Monday morning, we had an appointment for the expert to visit Pinecrest on Wednesday. I informed Karen by email that we'd be having an independent inspection of the alleged damage, and she responded with a curt message saying the HOA would not pay for it. I didn't expect them to. Wednesday morning, I met Roger Haynes at the entrance to Pinecrest Estates. He was a weathered guy in his 60s, wearing Carhartt overalls and carrying a toolbox that looked like it had survived several wars. So you think someone faked plow damage? He asked as we drove to the main road. I think the damage is too uniform and too recent to have been caused by plowing operations that ended weeks ago. We spent 2 hours examining the curbing. Roger took samples, measurements, photographs, and a lot of notes. Karen came out at one point to watch, arms crossed, saying nothing. Roger ignored her completely. When we finished, Roger packed up his equipment and handed me a business card. I'll have a full report for you in about a week. But off the record, that damage is definitely recent. I'd say within the last 5 to 7 days. The concrete dust is fresh, the edges aren't weathered, and the pattern is consistent with someone using a hand tool, not a plow blade, probably a masonry chisel or something similar. Can you put that in the report? Oh, I'll put all of it in the report. With photos and measurements to back it up. If someone deliberately damaged that curbing to create a false claim, my report will make that very clear. Karen must have heard some of that, because her expression shifted from smug to uncertain. You're wrong, she called out. That damage was caused by his reckless plowing. Roger looked at her for a long moment. Madam, I've been examining concrete and stone damage for 34 years. I know plow damage when I see it, and I know deliberate tool marks when I see them. This is the latter. He left, and I stood there with Karen in the cold morning air. You faked this damage, I said quietly. I did no such thing. Either you did it, or you had someone do it for you. Either way, that's fraud. That's filing a false claim with the intent to extract money from my company. In Montana, That's a Class C felony if the amount claimed is over $1,000. She went pale. You can't prove anything. Roger's report will prove when the damage occurred. My service logs prove we weren't here during that time frame. You've been sending me emails and complaints for weeks, creating a paper trail of your vendetta against my company. And I'm betting if the sheriff's department investigates, they'll find whoever actually did the damage, and that person will tell them you asked them to do it. This is harassment. No, this is me defending my business against someone trying to defraud me. You've pushed, and now you've crossed a legal line. I'm going to give you one chance to back off. Drop all claims about the curbing damage, stop the harassment, and we'll continue the contract as agreed. Or I take Roger's report and all our documentation to the sheriff's office and let them sort it out. Karen stood there, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. The wind blew snow dust around our feet, and somewhere in the development, a dog barked. Fine, she said finally. I'll drop the damage claim, but I want you to understand that this HOA will be watching your every move going forward. You've been doing that for months already, so nothing changes there. But if you try to create another fake claim, if you try to sabotage my business again, I won't give you another chance. I'll go straight to the authorities. She turned and walked away without another word. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. Roger's report came back a week later, and it was even more detailed than I'd hoped. He documented everything, including analysis of the tool marks that showed they were made by a 1-inch masonry chisel, applied with moderate force, creating uniform damage consistent with deliberate human action rather than incidental contact from heavy equipment. I sent a copy to Karen via certified mail, with a letter from Phil stating that we considered the matter closed and expected no further claims. She signed for it, but didn't respond. For 3 weeks, everything was quiet. Spring was approaching. My snow removal season was winding down, and I started focusing on my summer lawn care contracts. Pinecrest Estates had been quiet. No complaints, no drama. Then I got a call from David, the homeowner who'd spoken up during the curbing incident. Harrison, I think you should know something. Karen's been holding special board meetings and she's trying to get votes to pursue legal action against you anyway. She's telling people that your expert was paid off and the report is fake. How do you know this? My wife's on the board. She's been uncomfortable with how Karen's handling this whole thing. She thinks Karen's become obsessed with taking you down. Can your wife vote against any legal action? She will, but it only takes a majority vote, and Karen's been very persuasive. She's telling people that you're the one who damaged the curbing and you're trying to cover it up with fake reports. I thanked David and called Phil immediately. She's doubling down, Phil said after I explained. That's either very stupid or very bold. Did your guy Roger document his credentials in the report? Extensively. 34 years experience, worked with 3 federal agencies, testified as an expert witness in over 200 cases. Then let her pursue it. If she takes you to court with a fraudulent claim and your expert testimony contradicts her story, she's going to lose badly. And judges don't look kindly on people who waste court time with baseless claims. I don't want to go to court. I just want to do my job. I understand, but sometimes these things have to play out. Document everything, keep doing quality work, and let her dig her own hole. A week later, I received a formal letter from Robert Patterson, the HOA attorney. The Pinecrest Estates HOA was filing a civil claim against my company for $8,000 in damages, including the curbing repairs, legal fees, and punitive damages for contractor negligence and fraud. Fraud. She was accusing me of fraud. I called Phil, and we set up a meeting for the next day. He read through the claim letter and shook his head. This is one of the weaker claims I've seen. Their evidence is photos that don't prove timeline, testimony from Karen Fletcher who has a clear bias, and allegations that your expert report is fraudulent without any evidence to support that. So, what do? We file a response denying all claims. We provide Roger's report as evidence, and we also file a counterclaim for defamation and filing a false claim. If Karen Fletcher deliberately damaged that curbing to create a fraudulent claim, we're going to prove it and hold her accountable. Will that require me to prove she did it? No, we just need to prove that the damage didn't occur when she claims it did, and that your company wasn't responsible. The burden of proof is on her to show you caused the damage. If she can't do that, her claim fails. The case took 4 months to work through the system. During that time, I continued servicing other clients, but the Pinecrest contract became increasingly strained. Karen found reasons to complain about everything. I was leaving snowbanks too high, or not high enough. I was coming too early in the morning or too late. My equipment was too loud. My trucks were driving too fast or too slow. Every complaint got documented. Every response got documented. Phil was building a case not just for the curbing damage, but for harassment and an ongoing pattern of attempting to defraud my company. The preliminary hearing was set for late July, in the middle of Montana summer when snow was a distant memory. I wore my only suit and met Phil at the Flathead County Courthouse in Kalispell. Karen was there with Robert Patterson, wearing a navy dress and carrying a leather folder that probably cost more than my suit. She looked confident, composed, ready for battle. The judge was a woman named Sandra Morrison, in her early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and story there was. Patterson went first, outlining the HOA's claims. He showed photos of the damaged curbing, presented a timeline that claimed the damage appeared immediately following snow removal operations in February, and argued that my company had been negligent and then tried to cover it up with a fraudulent expert report. Then it was our turn. Phil stood up, and I could see him shifting into lawyer mode, all casual conversation gone, replaced by precise professional presentation. Your Honor, the facts of this case are straightforward. The plaintiff claims my client damaged curbing in February during snow removal operations. However, independent expert analysis shows conclusively that the damage in question occurred in early March, weeks after snow removal operations had ceased for the season. The damage patterns are consistent with deliberate tool marks, not incidental contact from plow equipment. Furthermore, we have testimony from residents of Pinecrest Estates indicating that the damage appeared suddenly, days before the plaintiff's initial complaint. He presented Roger's report, complete with photographs, measurements, and analysis. He presented our service logs showing we hadn't been in Pinecrest during the time frame when the damage must have occurred. He even had David's written testimony describing his observations. Judge Morrison read through everything carefully, taking her time. The courtroom was silent except for the air conditioning humming overhead. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Patterson, your claim relies on proving that this damage occurred in February. Do you have any evidence of the curbing's condition before February? Patterson shuffled through his papers. We have the plaintiff's testimony that she observed the damage following snow removal operations, but no photographs or documentation from before the alleged damage. The area was covered in snow, Your Honor. Documentation would have been difficult. Yet your client managed to take detailed photographs after the snow melted. It seems she could have taken photographs before as well, during a brief melt period, or during the previous fall? Judge Morrison looked at Roger's report again. This expert analysis is quite thorough. Do you have any evidence that contradicts it? We believe the expert was biased, Your Honor. He was paid by the defendant. All expert witnesses are paid by someone, Mr. Patterson. That doesn't make them biased. Do you have another expert who examined this damage and came to a different conclusion? No, Your Honor. Do you have any evidence at all that this damage occurred when you claim it did? Patterson's confidence was cracking. The plaintiff's testimony, Your Honor. Judge Morrison set down the papers and leaned forward. Here's what I see, Mr. Patterson. I see a plaintiff with a documented history of complaints against the defendant. I see damage that an experienced expert says occurred at a different time than claimed. I see a defendant with detailed records supporting his version of events, and I see a claim that appears to have been filed not because of actual damages, but because of personal animosity. Am I wrong, Your Honor? The HOA has a right to hold contractors accountable. They absolutely do. But they don't have a right to file fraudulent claims, and this is starting to look very much like a fraudulent claim. Karen stood up suddenly. That's not true. He damaged our property and tried to cover it up. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Madam, you need to sit down and let your attorney speak. But he's lying. His report is fake, his expert is lying, and he's been trying to sabotage our community for months. Mrs. Fletcher, sit down now or I'll hold you in contempt. Karen sat, but she was shaking with anger. Judge Morrison looked at both attorneys. I'm dismissing the plaintiff's claims with prejudice. The evidence does not support the allegation that the defendant caused this damage. Furthermore, I'm concerned about the nature of this claim and whether it was filed in good faith. Mr. Crawford, you filed a counterclaim. Phil stood. Yes, Your Honor, for defamation, filing a false claim, and harassment. I'm granting summary judgment on the false claim allegation. The evidence clearly shows this claim lacked merit. As for defamation and harassment, those will need to proceed to trial if the parties can't reach a settlement. She looked at Karen and Patterson. I strongly suggest you consider settling this matter. If it goes to trial and the evidence shows what I think it shows, there could be serious consequences. Patterson and Karen had a whispered conversation. Karen was shaking her head violently, but Patterson kept talking, his voice low and urgent. Finally, Patterson stood. Your Honor, could we request a brief recess to discuss settlement options? You have 15 minutes. We went out into the hallway. Phil was grinning. That went about as well as it could have. She's going to push for a settlement. What should I ask for? Your legal fees covered, a written apology, and an agreement that she drops all complaints and leaves you alone. Maybe a commitment to continue the contract through its term without interference. You think she'll agree to that? I think her attorney is going to strongly advise her to agree to it, yes. 15 minutes later, we were back in the courtroom. Patterson looked tired. Your Honor, the parties have agreed to a settlement. The HOA will pay the defendant's legal fees in the amount of $4,200, issue a written apology for the baseless claims, and commit to honoring the existing service contract without interference. In exchange, the defendant will drop the remaining counterclaims. Judge Morrison looked at me. Mr. Young, do you agree to these terms? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. Then this matter is settled. I'm ordering both parties to comply with these terms within 30 days, and Mrs. Fletcher, Karen, stood reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. I've been on this bench for 18 years, and I've seen a lot of HOA disputes. Most of them stem from people who forget that having a little bit of power doesn't make them emperor. You run a homeowners association, not a kingdom. Contractors like Mr. Young provide essential services, especially in rural areas where options are limited. Treat them with respect, honor your contracts, and stop creating problems where none exist. Do you understand? Karen's face was bright red. Yes, Your Honor. Good. This case is closed. We walked out of the courthouse into the July sunshine. Phil clapped me on the shoulder. Well fought. That judge basically called her out for being exactly what she is. Think she'll actually back off? She doesn't have much choice. That written apology is going to be hard for her to swallow, but Patterson will make sure she does it. And if she violates the settlement terms, you can bring her right back to court. The written apology arrived 3 weeks later. A single paragraph on official HOA letterhead stating that the board had made an error in its assessment of the curbing damage and apologized for any inconvenience caused to Young's snow removal services. It was the most grudging apology I'd ever received, but it was something. The $4,200 check arrived the same day. Karen Fletcher didn't call me again for the rest of the summer. When fall arrived and it was time to renew the snow removal contract, I received a formal letter from the HOA board, signed by a new president. David's wife, it turned out. The letter explained that the board had voted to restructure its leadership, and they hoped to continue our professional relationship on better terms going forward. I called David to get the full story. Karen went too far, he explained. After the court case, people started asking questions about how she'd been running things. Turns out she'd been using HOA funds for all kinds of personal expenses, claiming they were community-related. Restaurant meals she called board meetings, trips she called research into community management, even some home renovations she tried to write off as necessary for hosting HOA events. That's embezzlement. Yeah. The board did an audit, found about $30,000 in questionable expenses over 3 years, and voted to remove her as president. She resigned from the board entirely rather than face an investigation. Is she still living there? For now. But between you and me, I think she and her husband are planning to sell and move. The neighborhood's kind of turned against her after all this came out. I felt a small twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but an awareness that even difficult people are still people. Then I remembered the months of harassment, the fake damage claim, the court case, and the feeling passed. Well, tell your wife I'm looking forward to working with the new board. She's actually excited about it. She wants to make the HOA less about enforcement and more about actual community building. Novel concept, right? The first snow of the season came in late October, just a dusting that didn't require plowing. The second came in early November, 8 inches overnight, and I rolled into Pinecrest Estates at 6 a.m. with my crew. Karen's house was dark as we plowed past. Her driveway got cleared along with everyone else's. No special treatment, no delays, just professional service like I'd been providing all along. By December, I heard through David that the Fletchers had listed their house. By January, it had sold. I never saw Karen Fletcher again. The new HOA board was everything the old one wasn't. They communicated clearly, paid on time, and actually thanked me after major storms. David's wife, Michelle, sent cookies to my crew after a particularly brutal 48-hour marathon during a January blizzard. It was the kind of simple gesture that reminded me why I'd started this business in the first place, to help people, to provide an essential service, to be part of a community. Spring came again, the snow melted, and I transitioned to lawn care season. Pinecrest Estates became just another client on my route. No drama, no complaints, no court cases. Just regular work for regular people who appreciated having reliable service. One afternoon in April, I was mowing the common areas in Pinecrest when Michelle flagged me down. "Harrison, got a minute?" I shut off the mower. Sure, what's up? The board wanted me to ask if you'd be interested in expanding your services. We need someone to handle the landscaping for the entrance area, keep up the flower beds, that kind of thing. Nothing huge, but regular maintenance through the summer. I'd be happy to put together a proposal. Great, and Harrison, thanks for sticking with us through all the craziness last year. A lot of contractors would have walked away. Honestly, I thought about it, but I've got a stubborn streak, she laughed. Well, we appreciate it. Karen made a lot of people miserable here, not just you. Things are better now. I went home that evening feeling something I hadn't felt about Pinecrest Estates in a long time: optimism. The development wasn't a problem anymore. It was just a job, one I could do well and be appreciated for. My wife asked me that night if I thought Karen had learned anything from the experience. Probably not, I said. People like that usually don't. They just find new situations where they can be difficult and new people to push around. That's kind of sad. It is. But it's not my problem anymore. And it wasn't. The next winter came, and with it more snow, more plowing, more early mornings and aching backs. But Pinecrest Estates was easy now, just another development on my route, cleared efficiently and without incident. I'd learned something through the whole mess, though. When you're the only service available for 30 miles, you have a responsibility to the community, but you also have the right to be treated with respect. You can't let difficult people push you around just because they hold some position of minor authority. You document everything, you stand your ground when you're right, and you're willing to fight when you have to. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the difficult people get held accountable, the system works the way it's supposed to, and things get better. That's not a guarantee. It doesn't always work out that way. But in this case, it did, and I'd take that victory and appreciate it for what it was. A reminder that standing up to bullies, even HOA bullies, is worth the effort. The mountains around Whitefish still get buried in snow every winter. The storms still roll in without warning, dumping feet of powder overnight. And I'm still out there at 4 a.m., running my plows, clearing roads, making sure people can get to work and school and hospitals. It's hard work. It's cold, exhausting, sometimes thankless work. But it's my work and I do it well, and most people appreciate that. As for Karen Fletcher, wherever she ended up, I hope she learned something. I hope she found a way to channel her energy into something positive instead of making everyone around her miserable. But whether she did or not, it's not my concern anymore. I've got roads to clear, and there's snow in the forecast. That's enough to keep anyone busy, no HOA drama required.